Almost everybody who reads about the narrow gate walks away scared. You probably heard it the same way growing up. Heaven is hard to get into, and most people are not going to make it. And somebody probably used it to scare you. But here's what nobody told you. The narrow gate Jesus talked about is not a place you go when you die. It is not a test of how good you are either. The reason most people cannot enter it has nothing to do with sin. It has to do with something almost no one has ever told you to look for. Here on Decode Scripture, we are going to read this the way the words actually read. And three things are about to come loose. First, the oldest English Bible does not say straight gate. It says straight. One missing letter. And that one letter changes everything. Second, this gate is in an actual place, not in the sky, not in a church, somewhere you would never in a lifetime think to look. And a 2,000-year-old verse seems to point straight at it. Third, the Hindus and the old Persians both wrote about the same thing. A way so narrow it is like the edge of a razor, and almost nobody crosses it. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 14, Jesus says it plain, "Straight is the gate, and narrow is the way, and few there be that find it." Few. So, what was he actually looking at when he said it? Picture a football stadium after the game, 80,000 people, all pushing toward the wide exits. And over in the corner, there is one little side door that almost nobody uses. That is the picture most people carry when they read this verse. The wide road is the highway to ruin, packed with everybody, and the narrow gate is the tiny door to heaven that almost nobody finds. So let us actually think about that for a second. If that reading is true, then God built a system where almost everyone fails. He made billions of people, and he set it up so the broad road, the one with the whole crowd on it, leads to destruction. Most of his own children gone, and he knew it before he ever started. You are allowed to ask the obvious question. What kind of loving father builds a house where almost all of his kids walk straight off a cliff? That is not a lesson about love. That is a contradiction. A good God who guarantees mass failure cannot be both of those things at the same time. And here is the part nobody slows down to notice. Go read Matthew chapter 7, verse 14, with your own eyes. It says the narrow way leads unto life. It does not say heaven. The word heaven is not in the verse. Somebody added that later in their own head, because they were taught to. The gate was never a turnstile for souls after they die. It is something else entirely. So if it is not the door to heaven, and it is not a test of how good you are, then why does the oldest English Bible spell that one word so strangely? There is a jacket they use to strap people into in old hospitals. The arms wrap around and lock behind the back. They called it a straitjacket. Hold on to that word. For 400 years, people have read this verse and pictured the straight and narrow path. Straight, like a ruler. Straight, like walking the line and being a good, upright person. That is the whole moral lesson everybody thinks is sitting here. But that is not the word. The King James Bible does not say straight, it says straight. S-T-R-A-I-T. A different word with a different meaning. Listen to where that word still shows up. A straitjacket that binds your arms tight. Dire straits when you are in a tight spot with no room to move. The Strait of Gibraltar, a narrow squeeze of water between two pieces of land. Every one of them means the same thing. Tight, pinched, narrow. It comes from an old Latin word, strictus, which means drawn tight. It is where we get strict and constrict and stricture. None of those are about being morally upright. Every one of them is about being squeezed down small. So read the verse again with the real word in it. Straight is the gate. The gate is a tight squeeze, a narrow physical opening you have to press through. It was never about your behavior. It is about a passage through what? Think about the plumbing in a really old house, wide pipes running everywhere. But somewhere in the wall, there is one stretch where it all pinches down to something barely wider than a piece of pencil lead. Everything has to get through that one tight spot. Your brain is like that. Most people picture the brain as one solid lump. It is not. Inside it, there are hollow spaces, chambers filled with a clear fluid that cushions and feeds the brain. Doctors call that fluid cerebrospinal fluid, and those chambers are joined to each other by channels, so the fluid can move from one to the next. Now, most of those spaces are fairly roomy, but there is one channel that is different. It runs right through the middle of the brain, deep in the center, and it is dramatically narrower than everything around it. It is the tightest passage in the whole system. The fluid has to squeeze through it. When you look at it in an anatomy book, it does not look like a room. It looks like a slot, a crack of a passage in the dead center of your head. That channel has a name. Gray's Anatomy calls it the cerebral aqueduct, the single narrowest passage in your entire brain. A straight gate made of living tissue sitting right in the middle of your skull. And notice what that is not. It is not a sin. It is not a black mark on your record. It is a part of your own body. The gate was never about being good enough to walk through. It is about a passage you were never told you had. And that should stop you for a second. Because if Jesus was describing a tight inner passage, this is the tightest one there is. But a narrow channel on its own does not prove anything. So, why do a doctor's word for it, an old meditation instruction, and 3 different religions all land on the exact same thing? Most people think a traffic jam happens because there are too many cars. It does not. Watch it sometime. The jam always starts at the one place where the road narrows. The bottleneck is where everything stops. Here's the first strange thing. When that narrow channel in your brain gets blocked, doctors have a specific name for it. They call it stenosis. That word comes from the Greek word stenos, and stenos means narrow. So the medical name for a blocked narrow gate is literally the narrowing. A doctor looking at a closed passage in your head writes down a word that means exactly what Jesus said, narrow. Here's the second strange thing. Sit right at the top of that narrow gate, and you find a tiny gland the size of a grain of rice. It makes a chemical called melatonin. The NIH lays out exactly how it works, and here's the catch. It makes that chemical in the dark. Light shuts it down. Darkness switches it on. Now go read Matthew chapter 6, verse 6. Jesus says when you pray, go into your closet and shut the door. And in verse 22, he says, if your eye is single, your whole body fills with light. Shut the door, sit in the dark, the body fills with light. That is not poetry. That is the gland at the top of the gate doing its job. And here is the third strange thing. And this is where it stops being a coincidence. The Hindus wrote about this thousands of years ago in a book called the Katha Upanishad. They said the path is sharp like the edge of a razor and hard to cross. And the old Persian religion described a bridge to the next life that gets as narrow as a blade for anyone who is not ready. Different countries, different languages, neither one copying the other, both describing one narrow passage that almost nobody gets through. Bill Donahue spent his whole life pointing at this. He said it simply, the way is narrow, and it is above, not out there, up and in, so line it up. A medical dictionary says narrowing. A gland fills you with light in the dark. And two ancient religions draw the same razor-thin passage. Scripture, anatomy, and some of the oldest books on earth, all pointing at the same spot in the middle of your head. Bing, bing, bing. So if the gate is real, and it is inside you, then why did Jesus say almost nobody finds it? Try something. Close your eyes for a second and try to find your own heartbeat without touching yourself anywhere. It is in there. You have just never been asked to feel for it. That narrow gate is the same. It is not far away, and it is not waiting for you after you die. It is a few inches behind your eyes, in the dead center of your head, right now, while you are listening to this. So let us go back to the scary part. Jesus said, "Few find it. Most cannot enter." And for 2,000 years, people heard that and felt sick inside because they thought it meant most people are not good enough, not holy enough, headed for the fire. But look at what we just found. The gate is not a moral test. It is a direction. The whole world lives pointed outward, eyes open, chasing the next thing, the next sound, the next worry. That is the broad road, and everybody is on it, every waking second. The crowd is not evil. The crowd is just facing the wrong way, and almost nobody ever turns around. Almost nobody ever sits down, closes the eyes, and goes inward to look for the passage. That is why few find it. Not because the gate is locked, because they are looking out when the only way in is in. That is what Jesus meant. Most cannot enter the narrow gate. And it has nothing to do with sin. It has to do with which way you are facing. So if turning inward is the whole thing, how do you actually do it tonight? You do not open your eyes wider to see in a dark room. You wait. And after a minute, the dark itself starts to show you shapes. Going in works the same way. You do not force it. You get quiet, and the thing you are looking for slowly comes up on its own. So here is what you do tonight. It is free, it is simple, and you can do it before you fall asleep. Go into a room and turn off the light. Sit up straight and close your eyes. Let the outside world go quiet. Every sound, every worry, everything that pulls your attention out, let it all settle. That is you stepping off the broad road. Now rest your attention gently on the spot in the middle of your forehead, just behind your eyes. Do not strain. When a thought grabs you, and it will, just come back to that one still point. Then come back again, and again. That coming back over and over is the squeeze. That is you pressing through the narrow gate. This is the same instruction hiding all over the Bible. Psalm 46, verse 10. Be still and know, Matthew 6, verse 6. Shut the door and pray in secret. They were never telling you to go find a quiet building. They were telling you to go into the dark room in your own head and sit down at the gate. The full study for this video is linked in the description, where I lay out the verses, the word origins, and the anatomy behind this decode, step by step. Most people never find it, not because the gate is locked, but because they never turned around. You know where it is now, so go sit at it.